Is it okay if I don't wear a mask?
Yes.
Should I start, do you think?
No, I mean, so.
I think.
Yeah, I don't know that we need a lot of intro at this
Yeah.
point. So welcome everyone here, and I assume there are people also viewing from home. We've invited Rabbi Shulman to offer a brief lesson and an opportunity to lead into some back and forth with Rabbi Shulman and into questions. And I think you'll see that her shiur, her lesson, is very topical and timely to the transition that we are, right now going through. And so without a whole lot more fanfare, I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi Shulman.
Thank you. Yeah, as a rabbi and educator, I really believe in relevant Torah that speaks to us individually, that speaks to our community and our world. And personally, I've been thinking a lot about transitions. I am obviously in a career transition of myself, but I also have aging parents that I think about in terms of transitions. I have a new 7-month-old daughter and welcoming a second child into our family. And we all have different transitions in our lives. Think about how that lands for you, if that's professionally or personally. We also have changes, health, sickness and health, marriage and divorce, transitions as a result of COVID, changes in where we live or how we live. And we're going to be spending a little time today looking through the lens of Torah at some of those transitions that we faced in our individual and collective lives. So before we look at any texts, I invite you to turn to someone next to you, introduce yourself if you don't know them, or reintroduce yourself, and share what are the transitions that this is hilarious that the two rabbis are going to sit next to each other. What are the transitions that you are facing in your life? When you think about transitions in your life, either personally or within this community, what does that mean for you? And try to share an example or a few examples that speak to you personally. Okay, so turn to someone next to you and share what are transitions that you are facing in your life. You're wearing the bracelet. Take one more minute if you haven't both had a chance to share, switch so you can both share. All right, we'll go ahead and come back together. So I want to introduce a few texts. The first one is not a Torah text. It actually comes from a group of people that are in London, out in that other English-speaking country, and they introduced this 4 pillars model, which I think really speaks to our experience and traditions. And I learned this actually from a friend of mine and colleague, Rabbi Shoshana Gelfand, recently. So how Allison Lucas and Lizzie Bentley Bowers describe transition is that there are 4 critical pillars, and they kind of work in the organizational behavior world, but I think this actually operates on all sorts of levels. So they say there's a level transition that's about acknowledging the reality, naming the ending and the reality of the loss, including any tricky or messy stuff, right? What's going on? What's going on in your life, right? Is that a change in terms of someone that has passed away? Is that a change in leadership? Is that a welcoming a new person in life? The reality of what the change is. Secondly, and I think this is so critical, are the emotions. Allowing for the emotions in ourselves and others, and attending to the reality of those emotions. William Bridges, who's a writer, writes that it isn't the change in our lives that will do us in, and it's the transitions. He says change is situational sometimes, but its transition is psychological, he teaches. And I think so often we blow through transitions, and there's so many emotions, and we forget to really honor and attend to those, and also give people the benefit of the doubt, right? And because we are all such emotional creatures, and being able to name the joyful emotions, and also the sense of loss or regret or whatever else comes up for us as you think about the transitions that you shared about or others in your life. I think that emotional lens is important. Accomplishment, identifying, maybe even celebrating accomplishment is a key preparation for a ritual. So this, they talk a lot about the importance of having transition rituals that acknowledges the end of something, fully makes way for something else. We were just talking about this a little last night at the dinner table about an installation, for example, as a new rabbi is a ritual moment. But there are so many other rituals in our lives. Havdalah that we'll celebrate tonight is a ritual moment that acknowledges the transition of Shabbat to the rest of the week. But so is retirement, and so is so many different others things. And then finally, the ritual is a formalized or collective ceremony that acknowledges those transitions. And whether we honor that through a funeral or through a ceremony or whatever the transition is, being able to create space in our lives for ritual, for the appropriate transitions that we're facing, can help us through the psychological aspects of transitions in our lives. So there are 2 really similar and yet interestingly different crossings of waterways that the Jews go through, the Israelites go through. The first of which is the crossing of the sea from Egypt. That goes a critical moment in the birth of the Israelite people. So what does it say about that transition, and what can we learn about that transition for our lives? Well, let's take a look at the text first of all. It says, Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and God drove back the sea with the strong east wind all that night and turned the sea into dry land. The waters were split. The people of Israel went into the midst of the sea upon dry land, and the waters were a wall to them on their right and on their left. This is that moment of transition that, or there's probably a few moments you could sort of name this. One of the things I love about this text is Batoch Hayam, amidst the sea, Bayabasha, they were on dry land. Each of us can find that dry land in our lives through transition. That's the thing that helps to ground us. And that might be a relationship, that might be a sense of community, or something else. Can anyone think of what might be an example for you about what is some grounding force, or what is the dry land for you as you think about transition? Yeah.
Remember in the Ten Commandments, there's so many forces kind of pushing us away from
I love, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, coming back, tradition itself is a sense of dry land, and the familiarity and the importance of those teachings is healing, but it also helps guide us from wherever we were to the next step. It helps bridge that. And I think we've seen that even with COVID, how so many contemporary rabbis have tried to bring tradition and the lessons of tradition through the challenges of moving through COVID along with us, and the tradition informs to that. Thank you. Does anyone else have an example? Yeah.
Friends and family.
Friends and family. Absolutely. Raise your hand if that's resonant for you, if friends and family, yeah, have been such a source of dry land for so many of us. Let's hear one more. Does someone else? Yeah.
I think ritual. So it can be running every day, or taking a walk every day, or Shabbat, lighting candles. I mean, we have rituals in our life that are associated with religion and not. So that is a grounding activity.
Yeah. And I think COVID was such a reminder to us as we sort of went insular and we moved into our homes. There was a new opportunity to view the importance of home-based Judaism and those kind of rituals. So the rituals we do in our community-wide, and also the opportunities we have in our own homes and lives. All those Passover Seders we had to do on Zoom with family or do in a different way was a reminder that we all have that opportunity to create ritual in our lives. The next text that's on the sheet is actually one of my favorite transition texts, but just texts in general. So this is a Midrash, Sikha de Rav Kahana, from the 6th century. So Rabbi Yochanan was sitting in the Beit Midrash, expounding upon the verse. The waters were like a wall, and we just read that, were like a wall to them on their right and on their left. How could that be a wall? Rabbi Yochanan explained that it was like a sort of opaque net. But this amazing biblical character, Serach bat Asher, who shows up going into Egypt and then leaving Egypt and then shows up later in rabbinic times, as we see, she says, I was there, and the water was not a net, but as transparent windows like a mirror. As we go through the transitions in our life, we have an opportunity to find new perspective. Transitions are like a window that give us an opportunity to see our lives and community in new ways, but also like a mirror, reflecting back at us who we are as a person or as a family. Many of you that have walked through the experience of a loved one passing away and seeing how your family comes together through that experience and loss knows what that feels like, that mirror. But also through so many of the traditions, the transitions that we've gone through, we have this opportunity to see it as a window and a mirror. And certainly that's true for HEA. Through this process of transitioning to all the transitions that are happening to HEA, including but well beyond welcoming in a new rabbi, it's an opportunity to see the windows that illuminate perspectives, and also to do some identity questioning about who are we? What do we see in that mirror? And what are the characteristics of our community that we really want to bring forward with us forward? What does that look like? And as we learned in the 4 pillars model, that last stage is about ritual. So I'm going to skip the next text, which is a fun text about 2 guys, Reuben and Simeon, who completely missed the miracle because they were focused looking down at the mud and complaining how the dry land was a little muddy. And like many of us, when we are focused and we get stuck in the mud and we miss the big picture, they too completely missed the miracle. But I want to go to the next text, our friend Miriam, because Miriam brings the ritual. In fact, there's a Midrash that says that Miriam intentionally packed her timbrel with her for that moment after the sea. Somehow she had that wisdom or insight that they would need a sort of ritual to acknowledge that the trauma and the situation of Egypt, but also the opportunity was to sanctify that moment. And she brought her timbrel and took it up, and all the women went out and danced with her, which is a beautiful ritual. And we think about how there are rituals to celebrate the past and to welcome in the new chapter. And hopefully at Rabbi Dahlon's retirement party, there will be lots of timbrels. But we, sometimes we move forward so quickly in our lives that we forget to pause and celebrate everything that's going on. And I think Miriam does that. In fact, when I've been on search committee interviews in the past, I've asked candidates, I've seen your Moses, I've seen your Aaron, show me your Miriam. I want to see that, right? I want to see that animated part of you that can rally a community or bring that song and dance, whether you're a singer or not. So that's one example. I know I moved pretty quickly, but I want to look at a second crossing of the sea. So like so many stories in Judaism, there is a moment later in Tanakh that's almost like a second telling or retelling or an intertextual conversation between what happened earlier in the Torah and something. And there's a author, Judy Klitzer, who actually talks about this really intentionally. She talks about biblical characters like Noah and Yonah, who are actually really, you can look at side by side and see how one informs the other. They're mirrors. Yeah, thank you. And in this way, the story of Joshua crossing the Jordan is a sort of a mirror or a second opportunity for transition. We had Moses leading the Israelites people and all the different characters that were involved in that. And then if you flip your page over, we now have Joshua. So early next morning, Joshua and all the Israelites set out from Shittim and marched to the Jordan. Joshua said to the people, "Purify yourselves, for tomorrow the Lord will perform wonders in your midst." Then Joshua ordered the priest, "Take up the Ark of the Covenant." That's like the message about bringing the 10 Commandments with you as dry land. But now, remember, the Israelites didn't have the Torah. Sinai hadn't happened when they left Egypt, but now they're carrying this big, clunky Ark of the Covenant with the tablets with them, and advance it to the head of the people. So not only are traditions with them, but the traditions are actually leading the people. They took up the Ark of the Covenant and marched. The Lord said to Joshua, "This day, for the first time, I will exalt you in the sight of all Israel, so that they shall know that I will be with you as I was with Moses." So in case Joshua wasn't obvious that this is a similar transition moment, I'm going to remind you that I'm with you as I was with Moses, and that this is a similar moment that we are revisiting. Now the Jordan keeps flowing over its entire bed throughout the harvest season, but as soon as the bearers of the ark reached the Jordan, and the feet of the priests bearing the ark dipped into the water at its edge, the waters coming down from upstream piled up in a single heap a great way off. Adam, the town next to Zarethan, and those flowing up downstream to the Sea of Arabah, which is the Dead Sea, ran out completely. So the people crossed near Jericho. The priests who bore the Ark of the Lord's covenant stood on dry land, so we see that similarity, exactly in the middle of the Jordan, while all the Israel crossed over on dry land until the entire nation had finished crossing the Jordan. But wait, it's not the same. It's not Moses standing there, and then as the Midrash talks about Nachshon ben Aminadab, the guy who in the Talmud takes the first step. It's actually the leaders, the priests of the community, standing in the water, creating that space of transition. So this is a different leadership model. Now we have the board, or we have the group of people that are helping others through that transition. Many of you may have been that person or are that person for this community or for other people that are standing in the water with that courage, holding space for other people to make it through the transition as the priest did. When the entire nation had finished crossing the Jordan, the Lord said to Joshua, select 12 men from the people, one from each tribe, instruct them as follows. And now here's the ritual. Pick up 12 stones from the spot exactly in the middle of the Jordan where the priest's feet are standing. Take them along with you and deposit them in the place where you will spend the night. So the ritual of the stones is such a beautiful one that we can play off of as we think about the transitions in our lives. What are the stones? What are the artifacts or the memories that we take with us from this transition on with us, and to ritualize that moment by slowing down enough to pick up those stones? Joshua summoned the 12 men whom he had designated among the Israelites, one from each tribe. So really seeing each tribe and making sure that they are recognized. It wasn't just one stone, it wasn't 3 or 5, but it was 12 stones for each tribe. How do we make sure that we are inviting the 12 or many strands of our community with us, and doing that both through ritual and also through connection into the next phase? Walk up to the ark of the Lord in the middle of the Jordan, and each of you lift a stone upon your shoulder, corresponding to the number of the tribes in Israel. This shall serve as a symbol among you in time to come. So now they're looking forward, thinking about what will it be to look back at this moment. When your children ask, what is the meaning of these stones? You shall tell them, the waters of the Jordan were cut off because of the ark of the Lord's covenant. When it passed through the Jordan, the waters of the Jordan were cut off. And so these stones shall serve the people of Israel as a memorial for all time. And then, like an interesting sort of complicated way, a little bit later, we're going to actually see a repetition of that. The Israelites did as Joshua ordered. They picked up the 12 stones, corresponding to the number of tribes of Israel, from the middle of the Jordan, as the Lord had charged Joshua. They took them along with them to their night encampment. So this is the doing, and deposited there. Joshua also placed the 10 stones in the middle of the Jordan at the spot where the feet of the priests bearing the Ark of the Covenant had stood, and they remain there to this day. So like sometimes we start to see this repetition, it's a little bit different, but we end by saying, and Joshua set up in Gilgal the 12 stones they had taken from the Jordan. They charged the Israelites as follows, and here's another way of looking from the future back. In time to come, when your children ask their parents, what is the meaning of those stones? Tell your children, here the Israelites crossed the Jordan on dry land. For the Lord your God dried up the waters of the Jordan before you until you crossed, just as the Lord your God did at the Sea of Reeds, which God dried up before us until we crossed. So we're now looking back again to that moment. So now looking at these two crossings, these two transitions next to each other, what do you notice? What comes out for us as potential lessons that we can take from these texts into and through the transitions in our lives? What do people notice? Yeah. God has a hand in everything. I love that. Yeah, and it really connects to this week's Torah portion, right? Like, God has a hand in everything, and it's kind of up to us to not be Reuben and Simeon, but to find that, to see it, to be able to find God in the transitions, and to be able to create holy moments to invite a spiritual presence. Yeah.
I'll build on what Evie said. God gives us these things, but then Elaine, it is
Yeah.
So God splits the sea, going back and connecting your text. God splits the sea for us, but it's to us to take those steps in, and it's up to us to cross over. And so that part is similar in these two. That idea that there was dry land first, that's one part of it. The idea that there would actually be stones there is an evolution of that concept. Because if we have something tangible to hold on to, especially something that goes all the way back to Abraham when he left for God, when he went out and he stopped and set up a stone, and went forward more and then set up a stone. That idea of memorializing gives us a tangible piece to say this connects us to ourselves, to our history, and to God.
Yeah. Thank you. Absolutely. I hope people heard what you had to say about moralizing and having those tangible pieces and building off of what Abby said. Beautiful. What's that? I don't know if I can do it justice. That we have this opportunity to have the tangible elements and to be able to bring those with us is the last thing she was talking about in terms of really remembering that. And I think we can all think of something we carried with us at some point that was a really important reminder. I remember my grandfather gave me his dog tag when I was a child. And that was such an important thing that he had held on to because it was a pivotal moment that was definitional for him, but also because he lost his hearing in World War II. And for him, the moment that he gave me his dog tag was a critical moment, and I felt the importance of owning that item. And I still have it to this day. And we all have these physical and also non-physical things that are sacred, that have help us through those transitions. Yeah.
One of the things that strikes me about this ritual at the end is that part of its function is to remind the next generation that previous generations had gone through transitions before, and they made it through, right? And that change happens, and we draw on that resilience that we've learned from previous transitions to strengthen us in future transitions. And that seems to be the function of this ritual.
I love that. The normalization. They were going through crazy transitions back then, and we are facing transitions in our lives too. And I think the message to kind of amplify what Rabbi Grunwald is saying, when God reminds Joshua, I'm here with you too, it's sort of like, you're not the first. We've been here before. You can do this, right? And that change is a natural part of organic process that happens, and it can be scary and it can bring up all these emotions, but it's a critical aspect to the Jewish people. And for some reason, Joshua was the right person to do this second crossing. And he led them on and in partnership with these other leaders, and it was a critical time. Thank you for sharing that important lesson. I think it's one of the reasons we study Torah, is to find elements of normalizing the things we go through life, and then the wisdom and the courage to be able to do that. Yeah.
So one thing I'm noticing is that on the crossing of the Sea of Reeds, a lot of the elements, as you say, the ritual, the emotions, were retrospective. They were from a Midrash or the Sikha de Rav Kahana, which was, hundreds of years after we weren't even in Israel anymore. And yet we see when, in the story of Joshua, that these moments are all as written. And so it's as though they're more in the moment, which could also be seen from the fact that there's not any mention of people complaining or not noticing what's going on.
Right. Although we know that is a part of the transition, yeah.
Perhaps because, unlike in the first one, everyone is involved. It's not just Moses and Nachshon doing all the heavy lifting.
It's great. And that is such an important lesson we learn as a community, as leaders. We all know about all the grumblings that were in the desert. Oh, we had meat in Egypt, and we kind of look back and, right? And you're right, you're pulling out a wonderful lesson that by involving people in the process, we help to move the community. And there's always going to be complaining, because the fact is there were wonderful things at any moment that we draw on, we want to take with us, but being able to involve community in the process is such a critical thing we learn that helps us to be able to go through transition and have the wisdom from so many different places to be able to do that. And it's been so wonderful as through the search process to see this transition team. At other synagogues, there's a search committee. Here there's a transition team, and the people on the transition team have been so thoughtful about thinking through transition. And they are one of those groups of people standing in the water, helping the community to make this transition in the community, as well as so many other people. That is a critical role to play, and I love that they are named the transition. So thank you for pointing out some of those differences in terms of the community's level of buy-in. So I'll end by saying that we have an opportunity always to look back at transitions and to look at them and point out the moments. But we also have an opportunity when we are in transitions to acknowledge the realities, to notice and hold space and give each other the benefit of the doubt for the many emotions that come up during transitions that are a part of what helps us get through the process, but also to ritualize these transitions. So when you are in your transition moment next, or as a community, I invite us all to think about, how do we bring the lessons from the crossing of the sea and from the time of Joshua to help find those meaningful moments to learn about our communities, to learn about ourselves, and to involve others in that process to ritualize, remember, and lead the community forward. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, and thank you, Rabbi. And I want to reflect just one more thing, because we skipped over the text about Reuben and Shimon, who look at their feet and all they see is mud, and they reveal something really also truthful in transitions, that you brought out that reality pillar, that the paradox of Betoch hayam b'yavasha is that how can you be in the sea if it's dry, and how can it be dry if you're in the sea? And the reality is that transitions are not so clear-cut, right? They're not really dry land. And Reuben and Shimon actually reveal a truth that it's muddy and kind of mucky and hard, and that what anthropologists call a liminal phase, right? And calling that out and recognizing it and talking about it helps to get through it, and then to memorialize it with the stones and etc. And those liminal phases are opportunities for us to approach with curiosity, with inquiry, to learn and to work together through a transition. That's what we're doing, and what we'd like to do now for the next 30 minutes or so at most is to offer an opportunity for some back and forth, some Q&A to get to know you better. And I'm going to invite Karen Blank, our president of our board, to help facilitate that.
Thank you. We're going to do our best to use the microphone and leave our masks on, and I'll come around. And I just want to ask that if you'd like to ask a question of Rabbi Shulman, that you introduce yourself to her before you start.
Hi, my name is Noah, and I'll admit that my question might be somewhat missing the point. But in Sikha de Rav Kahana, Rabbi Yochanan, one of the greatest rabbis of all time, he's quoted all the time in the Talmud, is discussing presumably with his students a verse, and then a centuries-old person who was there at the Exodus just shows up and corrects him. Was this common? Did this happen all the time back in those days? Where it's nothing unusual here. I was there.
You know, I'll take it on a metaphorical level, and I think I think one of the things that we learn in that moment is that the people that have been around, there's lots of different perspectives, right? And I think it's Rabbi Yochanan has this beautiful wisdom to share, and he is like this masterful rabbi of the time. And also, Serach Bat Asher comes in, and she's like, no, but I lived through it. Like, that was my moment. I was there, and let me tell you about it. And they have this conversation together. And I think as communities, this conversation between new voices and older voices and different perspectives, and how much we have to learn from each other. When I was talking to Gatit, I just could feel the energy of someone that's been in the community for two or 3 years, right? Like more recently. And when I talked to Mallory and Joan before coming here, I just like love the energy and the what they had to share about people whose family have been here since the beginning of HEA. And I think that is a really important aspect to this congregation that really attracts me, is that it's a congregation of history. And the Colorado Jewish community has such deep history, and being able to honor that, and also continuing to have these new voices that are coming into that. So I think I think that the conversation between Rabbi Yochanan and Serach Bat Asher sort of animates something that we can relate to in this community and to our lives, of sort of being able to hear each other in the different perspectives that we bring.
Hi, Sarah. I'm Joel Israel. Is that working now? Oh, I gotta hold it up. Hi, I'm Joel Israel. So your experience with camps is both really rich and amazing and envious to me, and so I want to know, how are you going to bring camp to us?
You know, camp is a lot of special things, as many of you, raise your hand if you've ever been involved in a Jewish summer camp in some way. Wow, so I'm not just bringing it, it's here. But you know, camp, there's a number of things that are really special, I think, about camp. One is the ruach, the spirit the camp brings, and the joyful Judaism, which is, you know, any camp in their mission statement or what their camp community is about joy. And in fact, I was told by one of my mentors, Jay Frankel, not to use the word fun on the website of our camp because it's almost like so obvious. Right? It's like saying the word community around a congregation, because that's what we are. That's what we do. We do joy. And I think I can't help but feel like I will come here and bring joy and other things too. So that's one thing that's camp. I obviously have a love for working for both with kids and also kids at heart, whether you're, you know, as young as my youngest, which is 7-month-old, or our oldest congregant. So I think joy is one. But there's also a lot that I've learned by being a camp director through COVID, and how to navigate a community through all the changes and challenges. We had to close one summer, and then we reopened last summer. Things I've learned through the process as a leader of that camp, working with lots of different constituencies through that. I think there are other ways too in which, until I am in my next other side of the transition, I may not even fully realize all the different ways because it's such a part of the essence of who I am, and that sort of as a camp person, but also as a teacher and as someone that's worked in congregations. I think we all kind of bring these different aspects to our life. I don't think we are going to make any congregation into camp. I think it's so important that people have different communities that they can go to at different times. But there's a lot that we can learn about how camp Judaism happens outside, how it is such an important aspect for our young adults and young professionals in terms of their identity and community building, and for families, that I think there's lessons from that we can bring, just like there's lessons from all sorts of different experiences. But it is, I think, and I will also bring my loud camp director voice. And I'm sure that Jeff was back there like turning down the volume, because as a camp director, that is something that I will have to probably unlearn a little bit so I don't break the speaker system, right? But it's just like I appreciate the question. There's a lot of different layers to that. Yeah.
I'm Olivia Wallen.
Yeah.
In your discussion about transitions, which I think is really beautiful, how do we honor our history and honor traditions from our history while still bringing in contemporary observance, ritual, and traditions? And how do you see your job as a rabbi helping us to do that?
Yeah. I see my job as being a really supportive rabbi and partner to Rabbi Grunwald to navigate that process in partnership with the leadership of the synagogue and every member. I think this is, as we were just talking about transitions, this is such a wonderful opportunity to hear congregational voices. And what is it that the community really wants to see to maintain traditions and to bring in new things? And COVID has disrupted everything in our lives, our relationships, how we show up in this building and how we show up everywhere. And in that disruption, which has been incredibly difficult, there are new opportunities to look at how we do things, how we relate to one another, how we congregate, how we pray, how we learn, right? I mean, the fact that the religious school is on Wednesday on Zoom for the possibly foreseeable future, because it might be easier for kids across town to Zoom into religious school on Wednesday rather than coming in person. I don't know, maybe that'll go back in person, maybe it won't, but we're learning a lot. And I think when we can take the perspective of learning and to be able to approach these things, but I think it's really critical that we remember to honor our traditions. I think that's why I brought the teaching I did about Rav Acha Bar Yitzhak, is that the lesson about keeping the poles in helps us so we don't drop the ark, but that we can trust the process and that the traditions will be secure and we can continue to move and adapt while really honoring what's important here. I think that's important. And this congregation has such important traditions. I was laughing when I walked in the back of the congregation because I remembered the concept of makom kavua, which is like your holy seat, is something that for some people in this congregation is really alive. Like my family's been sitting in this row. Like I can look over there and I see like Neil Biscar, I think seated like somewhere in a few rows back there, right? Like there's so many traditions, as Bob talked about how, he's been here for 67 years. There's such a richness, I think, to the traditions. And I think through thoughtful conversations, I've led communities through change in a lot of different ways and brought together lots of different voices, whether that's around Israel or around new traditions. And I think when you approach it from a place of real honoring and listening and respect, I frankly think there's incredible opportunities. HEA has done so much over the last decade in terms of adding the Shir Hadash service and bringing people together. And I think the future is really bright for this community. And I'd really want to be a great listener and a great supporter and leader and partner in that process.
Hello, my name's Howard Convisar. I'm just curious if when you do your sermons on Saturday morning, if you'll ever address any kind of current events or contemporary issues such as anti-Semitism, issues with Israel, the Arab-Israeli conflict, the high percentage of intermarriage. Will you get into any kind of political, thinking? And
What are you hoping I'll say?
I'm hoping you'll say yes.
Yeah. So I really believe that speaking to the moment, as your wonderful rabbis I've seen do here, is really critical, and also honoring and knowing your community and the different perspectives of this wonderful, diverse community. So yes, absolutely, it would be such a missed opportunity. Today I spoke more about community, but I could have spoken about what's happening in the news or what's happening in our communities. There's so many different opportunities, and sermons, teachings, conversations, because the sermon is just one moment of the week. There's so many other rich moments and opportunities to find how the wisdom of our traditions can help shed light and bring new ways, new perspectives, and help us engage and understand and be supported through what's happening in our world, whatever that looks like, if that's in the city of Denver, if that's in this country. So yeah, absolutely. I really believe, as you can see, since I spoke about transitions today, I'm not afraid to speaking to something that's relevant for the moment. And at the same time, kavod, which is one of our core camp values, and having really respect for the diversity of the community and different voices is also critical. So I can also commit to saying that I will be really mindful in terms of how I speak, and both in individual conversations, just like Rabbi Dahlin and Rabbi Grunwald are, because it's important that we don't alienate one another in a world where there are far too many people that are already alienated, and we want everyone to feel safe and seen when they walk into this building. Yeah.
Hi there, I'm Howard Saft. Yeah, thank you for coming and your insight with camp. We've seen outside of HEA, we've seen this, kind of the separation and kind of how the media and social media bubbles have kind of created personalized, like augmented realities for people that have, manipulated emotion, manipulated a lot of different things. Can you talk a little bit about kind of how the Hashem's teachings might be able to help us through this kind of rough transition and guide us in the right direction?
Do you mean specifically, can you clarify just a little bit? I want to make sure I understand your question around specifically technology, or?
How we perceive it. How we perceive it, and because we see our different personalized media bubbles, and then they get us. It's getting good people with common principles to kind of dividing them. And
So first of all, I think technology has been a real incredible opportunity to help us connect and stay connected, and through such a difficult time, and being able to use the tools of technology in continual ways that are positive and respectful and in line with our values. I think one of the things that's such a gift for all of us to have, and also for the children of our community to have, is to have the lens of Jewish values and texts and teachings, to be able to know how to navigate an increasingly complex, polarizing, and sometimes even hateful world, where sometimes, concepts around truth and individuality and how people express themselves can be really challenging, get played out on social media. At camp, I always have a conversation with my staff about their social media presence at camp. And for many of them, it's the first time that they've really thought about it, because it feels like this is a mode of expression and connection, but now as being a dogma, a model for the kids that they're on staff for, they start to see their presence out there in a little bit different ways, as we do when we transition to being parents or at other times. So, I really believe that our tradition has deep teachings that can help us, and by coming together as a community and thinking about those values and having conversations, we can continue to do that. There's a lot of things we can't control, right? And I think it's up to each of us to figure out how can we bring our gifts, and what is it that we can bring that will bring out positive influence, energy, and help serve the world. And I think the last couple years have been really challenging with all the things that are out there that are out of our domain of control, that the tradition can speak to, but that we may not have direct control out of, and that yet we all have spaces in our lives where we really can bring the world as we want it to be, and not just the world as it is.
Hi, Amir Kaufman. So today was an amazing attendance. It was great.
I'll come back next week.
Sure.
Oh wait, there's someone else.
So it was really great to see so many people here. I'm here almost weekly since we reopened, and we have the regulars coming week after week. How do you see? How can you help us bring people to? I mean, the attendance like this week will be minimal.
Yeah.
So we'll go back to normal in some way.
Yeah. There are so many pathways to engagement, and it's something that excites me so much. I've been really involved in my synagogue, I live in Foster City, at helping to bring the families back and thinking creatively about, first of all, leading services on Zoom, and now I do a lot of outdoor service leading. I guess that's another example of how I might bring camp here. What brings people back? Well, first of all, being here and seeing one another is so critical. Another thing is being in a prayer service that is meaningful and singing along and being able to be involved up on the bima or, reading Torah, as Mallory will help inspire us to do, like being engaged and having a place and lots of opportunities for people to feel like I'm here to see one another and my friends and also to be involved. But I also think creatively, who are the folks that don't feel comfortable at the moment coming to synagogue, and how do we reach them? I am delighted that our youngest kids will, God willing, have an opportunity to be vaccinated soon. I think that will help younger families who we all miss having kids in our synagogues come back. And I think working with lay leaders, working with members to find opportunities to bring back different populations in meaningful ways, whether that's a family service in the parking lot, not when it's snowing, or maybe when it is with a heater. Congregations all over the country are doing innovative things. I have a friend that's leading these outdoor tented service with heat lamps that they run. I mean, everyone's thinking creatively about how to do things, and there's a lot of people who can come in the building right now, and also some people who are joining us on cameras or that kind of thing. And there's also people who haven't been to synagogue in 2 years and kind of gotten used to that. And now we need to figure out ways to bring back. So that's one thing, is about finding different ways, and I'm really excited to think through opportunities with the amazing staff that you have here about how to bring communities back and really continue that wonderful diversity of services and things that have. But it's not only about Shabbat. A synagogue is open 7 days a week, and there are so many, as your family knows so well, there are so many gateways to entry, whether that's through the HEA Connect and the Tikkun Olam Club, or whether that's through learning, or whether that's through the preschool, which frankly could be better connected, right, to the rest of the community, but that's difficult right now. There's so many opportunities to bring people into the building or bring people connected. I love the Shabbat clubs. I was hearing about a West Side group of people that, a Connect group on the west side of Denver that are meeting. I mean, one of the reasons I applied for this position is because this congregation has so much of the infrastructure, the social infrastructure already to connect people and to create those pathways back to the community. And now it's about connecting with people and continuing that process as people feel safe and comfortable, but also making those Friday calls to people who are a bit isolated and really asking people how we can reach them and bring them in. So I think it's a process that'll involve a lot of different people, and you have an incredible staff here that are so passionate about that engagement. Shira and the rabbis and Morty, and it was really wonderful to meet with them and talk about some of their ideas and how excited they are to partner with the community to do that. And that really excites me too.
Okay, I got it. Woohoo! Rabbi Shulman, nice to see you again and to speak a few weeks ago. I find myself thinking about the first source that you shared with us in this conversation about transitions, and I do think you're right, this is a very relevant conversation for our world and especially this HEA community. And you commented on number 2 in this 4 pillars model, emotions. And as a community where there is a lot of care and connection, there are also high emotions. And so I would like to hear your philosophy on how to best channel emotions when they run high. And, you know, sometimes that's positive and sometimes it's not. I've shared with you that in my former professional life, I was a fundraiser, and I learned in that realm that hate is not always the opposite of love. Actually, apathy is. So that's kind of where I stand on things. But I'm curious, how do you channel emotions, even when they maybe aren't aligned with your position, or they're maybe in some ways threatening or overwhelming?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, emotions are really critical. First and foremost, I listen. I've always really loved to listen, and I think it's not a coincidence that the Shema reminds us, our sort of central line of Torah and liturgy reminds us, here, listen, people Israel, right? And actually recently I did an executive coaching program to become a trained executive coach precisely for that, to learn different ways of listening and to build on my pastoral counseling and pastoral training with listening. So I think those emotions need to be heard. I think being able to create space, time and place, in the right appropriate time and place, one-on-one or in the right settings to be able to share those emotions and really honor those, I think is really important. I think otherwise they're still there. Right? And I think some of us have emotions and we work through it and we talk to someone else, and some of those emotions need to come to the leadership. And I think everyone's a little bit different in terms of through our own transitions in terms of what it looks like. But as a rabbi, I really believe in listening. I think it's probably one of the most important things that we do as rabbis is holy listening, to be able to hold space with that, and hope that we can primarily do that, and maybe at times offer some framework or context to help bring about change based on that, to help also be able to move on to the other stages of transition, but to be able to really hold those as holy, and to sometimes even ask, like, what's this person really asking? What's this person really saying? Like, what is beyond that? I really believe in the model of like going upstream, right? Sometimes we look at problems and we are really far downstream, but like, what's really going on back upstream that's causing this? I'm part of a congregation where there's some real nastiness around high holidays and whether or not to invite people that weren't vaccinated in the room for high holidays, which was a real challenge because they wanted to be inclusive, but they also wanted to honor the safety of everyone in the community. And the conversation was not done in the holiest way. And that was really hard for people in the community, and it was really hard for the clergy, right? And I kept wondering, how could this conversation, it's easy in hindsight, but like, how could this have looked different is one, but also like giving the people the benefit of the doubt. Those people that are angry or frustrated, like, what are they going through? This has been a really hard time in the last 2 years in our lives individually and collectively, like giving each other some bandwidth, right? And like some grace, right? Where it's like, I've developed a super thick skin professionally because it's important to be a good leader, but also because it's like, you never really know what the person in front of you is going through until you ask, right? And I think we really need to honor what's going on with other people and to listen and give each other the benefit of the doubt and create opportunities to listen to one another and to also to be able to work through some of those emotions and make some constructive change, because sometimes emotions lead us to the most constructive opportunities. So thank you for that question.
Yes, Rabbi, it's a pleasure to have you here. Thank you. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself, and then I wanted to ask you a more personal question.
Please.
My wife, Cynthia, here is on the transition team. As we were coming to shul this morning, I was asking her a little bit about the process. I moved to Denver some 25 years ago from California myself, and we had our 3 children bar mitzvahed here, and one of our children, adult children, is now very observant. Our other 2 are much more liberal. And my question to you is, where do you see the future of conservative Judaism, and why did you choose to become a conservative ordained rabbi?
Yeah. Rabbi Grunwald mentioned to me after I gave my sermon today that idea of, I mentioned adaptive Judaism, could be a tagline for the conservative movement. And in the best possible way, because part of the reason I chose to go to rabbinical school, and I grew up as a conservative Jew in Seattle, but I've stayed within that, is I love this enterprise of adaptive Judaism, where we're taking our Jewish traditions and adapting them to our world today. And that's what conservative Judaism is. It's a tension, a dynamic, positive tension between tradition and modernity, right? And being able to have that those aren't juxtaposed against each other, but that's a dynamic tension that creates a really positive connection. I also think conservative Judaism is not afraid to utilize Hebrew and text and wisdom and be able to really speak to the most authentic aspects of our tradition. So, I believe that. I also think conservative Judaism has gone on its own journey and will continue to do so in terms of asking questions about what conservative Judaism is, who's a Jew, and a number of different sort of key defining questions that the movement will continue to face. This congregation is so unique because it started off in a group of shtibels in Westside Denver as an Orthodox community and has come here, and it holds lots of different kinds of Jews. In some ways, it's a conservative community and it's a pluralistic community, and its diversity is one of its strengths. And I would really hope to be a rabbi here and to be able to connect with lots of different people, including like those related to you, to be able to find what is it that you're hungry for. We have a big building here, and there's with a lot of great staff and a lot of different people with different gifts. And I think there's really an opportunity to meet the needs of so many different people here and keep a thriving conservative community. And that question about what is Judaism for us and how do we adapt and bring that forward is a wonderful question for the entire community to think about, as well as the leadership of the community, the board. And that is something that has been a part of this community, I know, in so many mindful ways, from which Siddur is used in the pews, to how the sanctuary is set up, to which direction people face for different prayers, right? That intentionality in each of the decisions is a process that I feel confident will continue for the future, and is a wonderful challenge and opportunity that this community faces, that can be done in, I think, such an important and wonderful and healing way, which will hopefully make so many different people in the community feel like this continues to be their home.
Thanks, Rabbi Shulman. I'm going to have David ask the last question here, because I know you've had a long day, and before I hand it over to David, I just want to remind everybody, if you still have your service guides from this morning, there's a QR code here where you can use your phone tomorrow to provide feedback about the visit. We also have some pieces of paper outside with the surveys, so please make sure that you take some time to do that. And if you really had a burning question, you can always email it to us, and we'll get you the answer from Rabbi Shulman.
Hi, Rabbi. I'm David Rosenthal. I wonder if you would share with us what has prompted you to seek a transition in your life and in the lives of your family.
Yeah, thank you. So over the last decade, I have found that one of the parts of my work that I love the most is my relationship building community work and working with families, working with kids, working with staff, working with parents. And I have found that it is that work through, as a rabbi and educator, that is so near and dear to my heart through, working with donors, the board, the campers, and the staff. And I've started to take on more and more pulpit work over the years, being really drawn to that opportunity to do community work and relationship building work and to really serve a community. And so there's a number of reasons that have sort of prompted this transition at this moment for me. But probably the biggest one is really a yearning and a desire to support a community and support individuals through that relational work, that pastoral work, life cycle work, teaching, so many different dimensions, to get to know and serve individuals and a community. And that really excites me. At camp, we have this amazing community for 2 months of the summer. And I am so proud of that. And it takes so much work. It's the most ridiculous job where you work 10 months to run something that's 2 months. And I get asked all the time, what do I do the other 10 months? And it is a tremendous amount of work, as anyone that is in camping knows. But I miss being in a community year-round that I can serve. And that is something that really excites me, and that I think will be such a wonderful fit for my skills and interests and passions, is to be able to move into pulpit life and to be able to be involved in the daily workings of a community, whether that's on a pastoral, educational, organizational level, and support people at different ages, young and older. So that's a really exciting opportunity for me, and I am truly excited to come into it with a lot of curiosity, getting to know this community and all the amazing things about this, and a lot of support for different people, and a lot of partnership with the great people that you have here. So it's a hard thing to say goodbye to, because it's been a baby for me. I had my first child, Liel, a few months before camp opened, which was like having 2 babies at once, because I had Liel and I started this camp. And as founder, it is hard to move on in some ways, and I will need to put some stones at Ramat Galim or something at some point to be able to kind of ritualize that transition for me in my own way. But it is also so deeply nourishing and exciting to think about being in a place where I can bring my full self year-round and partner and get to know so many wonderful people and really commit myself to the service of a community. I think of all the Jewish values that maybe animate me the most, avodah, or a really expansive sense of service, is truly near and dear to me. Yeah.
Rabbi
Thank
Shulman,
you, everyone, for being here.
Rabbi Shulman, thank you for sharing your wisdom with us this afternoon, and giving us an opportunity to get to know you better. For those of you who may be connected to young ones, please join us this evening. I apologize that I don't know the time, but I'll find out the time if you want to know. If you want to join us.
5:30.
5:30. But you have to come in your pajamas, because it's a pajama Havdalah program.
I thought about bringing my skunk onesie, but I actually left it. I left that one at home.
We really appreciate all of you staying and being with us today to meet Rabbi Shulman and hear from her. And we look forward to seeing you next Shabbat. Thanks.
Thank you so
Rabbi
much, Karen.
Shulman.
Shabbat Shalom.